Hey everyone, it's Jessie G here. Welcome back to Jessie's Hangout. This is Season 3, Episode number 1. Apologies for this being so late. This was technically supposed to be posted on Friday, but due to some information issues that I had when I had written the notes out, I had to add more and take some more out and reread some stuff over again because I wanted to make sure that when I did this true crime cold case that I had all the information that I could possibly need for this episode. So much apologies for this being later than it should have been, but you know, better late than never posting it. But anyways, you guys all know what today's episode is all about. I've been hinting about it on my social media. We are going to be talking about the cold case, unsolved cold case of Jonbenet Ramsey. She was a little 6-7-year-old little girl who was found murdered in her home on December the 25th, 1996. We're going to be talking about that today. But before we get into today's episode topic, if you're new to the channel and you happen to come across this episode, hi, I'm Jessie G. I am the owner and creator of Jessie's Hangout, 12 Facts, and I also do other things on this channel. I do some gameplays here and there. And if you're interested in this type of content that I put out on this channel, please hit that red subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss out on anything interesting and, you know, all the above. So there's that. Also, if you want to stay more up to date and hear little tidbits or get little tidbits about what the topics are going to be for each episode or what's going on with each episode, check the description box below this episode. You will find all of my social media and everything listed below. Also, don't forget to pause this video before you start listening to today's topic. There is the opening credits, the trigger warnings, the disclaimer, the usual. I hope you guys have liked the new opening for Season 3. That was pretty cool. I did post it on my Instagram. The official opening, which you see, and the opening that I had done that didn't really make the cut. So go check those out. It's on my Instagram story if it's still showing up on there. I don't know how they do that, but I'm pretty sure you'll find a way to find those. But it's on my Instagram. Go check it out. Anyways, let's get into today's topic. Also, before we get into today's topic and before Jessie G forgets, there is going to be little facts and things about the case, and also little tidbits of about Jonbenet's parents, John Ramsey and Patricia Ramsey, and all that stuff. So feel free to pause the video at any given moment to read those before you go on if you choose to. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Jonbenet Patricia Ramsey was born on August the 6th, 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia. She was the youngest of two children of Patsy Ramsey and John Ramsey. Her brother, I'm going to botch his name and completely sorry for that. Berkey Ramsey was her oldest sibling, her older brother, I should say. He was born before Jonbenet. Jonbenet was named after her dad, and her middle name is from her mother. So she was named after both of her parents, and which is bittersweet. Jonbenet wasn't your typical average 6-year-old little girl who would play with toys and run around and things. Her mother and her did a thing that they bonded together over. Jonbenet was a pageant contestant in the Little Miss contest. She did different pageants and different things like that. It was something her and her mother bonded over. Her mother also was a pageant contestant in the West Virginia pageant where she won the title Miss West Virginia in 1977, and her sister, which you will also read about in the little clip or photo of information. Her sister also won that title in 1980, and that's when John met Patricia Ramsey, or in this case Patricia. That's when they met each other, and they married in November of that year. Patricia Ramsey was a doting mom. She was doting mom, and she cared about her children. I mean, she came off that way to everybody, and her children were basically her world. And if any parent listening to this can totally understand that, whether they have a human child or a fur baby, they are your world no matter what. And Patricia Ramsey was like that. They had this kind of, I wouldn't necessarily call it a white picket fence family, but it was kind of like this clean-cut family life. You wouldn't think anything would go wrong with these guys. They were pretty much perfect to a certain degree. Let's put it that way. And as time went on, in 1996, on December the 25th, Patricia Ramsey was going down the stairs. Sorry for the movement of this and also the fan background. But anyway, on December the 25th, 1996, Patricia Ramsey was going down the stairs like her normal, everyday routine. She was going down the stairs, and she gets halfway down the stairs, and she finds a ransom letter on the stairs, and suddenly realizes that her daughter has been allegedly kidnapped. At the time, that's what they were thinking. And the way that this letter was written was really strange, which I'll get more into that as I talk about the case too. When she found that letter, she went straight to the phone and called 911. But the thing of it is the 911 recorded call was so weird because she was so emotionless. It could have been various reasons for that. It could have been just a shock or just the heat of the moment and really wasn't quite processing everything. I mean, that's possible. But it was just really weird to law enforcement. It was just really weird that she really wasn't hysterical like a normal person should be. It was just really strange. And it wasn't like a parent to do that, because when a parent loses their child, they're hysterical. And she wasn't that. And she wasn't, basically, in other words, flipping out. And she wasn't doing that. And what made this whole case even worse, which you'll see the fact that will come up eventually in this, there was a lot of errors in the case. Boulder Police Department got to the scene, and there was too many people coming in and out of it, contaminating the scene. And when they gave statements, they didn't give the full statements of John and Patricia Ramsey and everybody else that was in there. It was even more weird because when under the circumstances that they were in, and in this particular case, you would think that if you had a second child, you would want to keep them either near you or send them to the police station where they feel a little bit more safe and they're not around this environment. Well, John did the opposite and sent him somewhere else, and Boulder Police Department couldn't even question or even get a statement from the child because the parents wouldn't allow it, which in that typical situation, they have the right to do that because their child is underage and he was young. So there was that. So that was a little strange to them. Also, when they were searching the house, in Patricia Ramsey's statement, there was a statement that she made when they got home and went to bed and did their normal thing, like she was saying in the statement, that they didn't eat anything that night because of all the stuff that was going on through the holidays, allegedly. And they found a bowl that had pineapple residue in the sink, and they found that really odd. And it was supposedly, from what I was gathering, it's the only bowl that was in the sink, if I'm not mistaken. And they also looked in the drawer, and they found the tablet that the supposedly the ransom note was written on, and the marker that it was written on, but it was in the drawer in the house, which was even more strange to them. And when the police had the ransom note, it was handled so much that they couldn't get any fingerprints off of it. So that was another error in that. And also their other biggest errors as time went on, when they thought maybe the person that had written the ransom note would call, because allegedly the money that the person or man or woman or whoever was asking for John's Christmas bonus check that he got. It was matching the same way as that, and only John and Patricia knew that. Nobody else knew that. And Boulder Police Department found that kind of weird, but they were waiting around to see if somebody would call. They had all their hookups to listen in on phone calls. I'm assuming at the time they had that. But you'll also have to bear in mind that Boulder, Colorado has never experienced, their little suburb part of Boulder, Colorado, nobody has ever experienced anything like this. They were not really prepared for anything like this, because when the ransom note was written out, they thought it was some type of terrorist or some type of organization, so a lot of people were involved. I'm assuming as far as the FBI was involved, and it was really crazy. It was all messed up. I mean, the whole situation was crazy. It just discombobulated even. And they waited around for a couple hours, and then this is where things went really wrong. This is when Boulder detectives really screwed up. Excuse me for saying that, or let me rephrase that. They really messed up. And they lost track of John Ramsey. They were supposed to keep an eye on the both of them in the living room of the part of their house, and they lost track of them. And apparently John had gotten up with another family member and had went and searched for his daughter. And allegedly he went down into the basement, and that's where he found his daughter was found murdered or deceased in his basement. Instead of leaving the body there like you were supposed to when you find the body, even though at the heat of the moment when you find your kid, and you know a lot of emotions are running through, and I can't possibly imagine what would go through any parent's mind. It's their own worst nightmare. They live in a nightmare. I can't possibly imagine that. And you know, a lot of logic and reason and everything kind of goes out the window at the time. But anytime that would happen, you would think that they would go and get the police and bring them down here and say, hey, look, she's found in the basement, or some sort of thing like that. But that wasn't the case. John picked her up in a blanket and brought her upstairs and made the situation even more worse, because Patricia saw it, and that was it. As you guys could pretty much know what happened there. And because they handled her, and because of everything the body was also tainted with, but they went ahead and got what they could evidence-wise from Jonbenet herself. And it was pretty gruesome what happened to her. I won't really go into details as to what happened to her, but it was pretty gruesome from what I heard from the documentaries and from what I read about. It was pretty gruesome. And it was pretty tragic, to say the least. And it didn't help that their area really wasn't the best area in the whole world, which you'll see a little fact about that, and you'll see what I mean. It really wasn't the best area to begin with, and it was really bad. And as the case went on, they allegedly had their first suspect, which was one of the suspects that were talked about, was Alex Rich, who was known as John Marker, which he was a known offender to the Boulder police department, because he was registered in there. So they know that he was a known offender. And of course, making a name for himself and just being really downright evil, he falsely confessed to a murder of Jonbenet when he had nothing to do with that case. He just took what he saw from the news stations and the reports and everything and took it and ran with it. And because of that, it threw a wrench in the whole investigation because they were putting so much time and effort into it. And then they had another suspect, which you guys seen pop up, which was known as Bad Santa, which is the fact, which that was really crazy even of itself. But he was acquitted of it, or basically ruled out. It was just really crazy because they only conducted enough statements from them two. They didn't really check out the other suspects, from what I believe. And that's when they started targeting the parents. And that's when things started to get really crazy, because as they were targeting the parents and finding more information, that's when they found the pageant videos, and the pageant videos became known to the public, and people started coming up with all these weird conspiracy theories and what they thought had happened to the little girl, and they were just totally throwing this whole case into this wild spin that really wasn't meant for that to even happen to begin with. And Boulder detectives kind of lost complete control over the case, so that didn't help. And it just sort of blew up in their face, really. And it got even more worse for John Ramsey, because he ended up being accused of assaulting his daughter. And also, you see a little fact on the screen that'll pop up a little bit more about that. But he was accused of assaulting his daughter, and also him and Patricia were also #1 suspects in the case, and they kept looking at them because they had this feeling that they were both responsible for it, because the letter was tested against Patricia's handwriting and it was a match. So they knew that she had written the letter, but they don't know exactly why. And also, what was strange about the letter, it wasn't so much that they knew about John's bonus check that he would get for Christmas, but there was it was signed SBTC. Basically, it's a sub-bay training center. It was a Navy training center where John had attended. Back in those days, John was a Navy person. He was a civil crop engineer, which you guys seen that as you read John's background. So he had this little plaque downstairs from it. And that's what made them even spike more of their real interest in John, thinking he really did have something to do with it. The both of them did. And they denied the police an interview or a statement for a long time. They went back and forth with the Ramseys. The Ramseys would not say anything. They didn't have any press conferences for a while or anything, until all of a sudden, a few years after the death, they finally stated they were going to have an interview with the police department. And they made their interview, and that totally blew up in their face. And even years after the case of going on different shows and having different interviews, people are still baffled, and it's still blowing up in their faces of how it is. At first, they thought maybe the brother had something to do with it, or the brother knew who had something to do with it even. And they couldn't get a real statement out of him until a few years later, where he was an adult and he finally talked about it. But they couldn't really get anything out of him either, because his interview was so weird. The whole case was just weird. And about 25 years later, John Ramsey and his wife are still the suspects in the case concerning their daughter's murder. They have been the subject to every social media ridicule, even to the new social media platforms, Facebook and everything. They were blasted for everything because people thought that these two were responsible for it, but it wasn't until they did a DNA test against the DNA that was allegedly found at the scene on Jonbenet's body, And the test came back saying that they had nothing to do with it. It didn't match. Although the letter having her handwriting and also the way that it was signed, pointing towards John, it still made Boulder police still have speculation about the two. That just because they didn't do it and that DNA wasn't on the body, they still suspected that John still had something to do with it, but John and Patricia Ramsey both know they didn't. Now, I mean, you can form your own opinions about that, but that's what they thought. But anyways, as you see, the DA issued an apology statement to the Ramseys, and sadly, during that time in 2006, Patricia Ramsey died of cancer, her battle with cancer, and John allegedly, as you've seen a little bit more in the background, or a little bit more background about him, that he had met someone, and then he downplayed that relationship until he finally married his third wife, Jan, which they live in Utah, and he's now in his 70s or 80s now, and he's still pursuing the case. He's still trying to figure out what happened. He's done interviews about it after the aftermath and years later, and they're still talked about to this day. They still don't know who did it. They still don't have all the facts of exactly who did it, and it remains a cold case to this day. And it was really sad because the fact that it happened on Christmas, the fact that it happened on a holiday, there were so many factors that went wrong in this case, and Boulder Police Department still won't really talk about it. He's tried to get other police departments to look into it. He's tried to do other things. He's kind of clashed and butted heads with them a lot because of the case. But they really won't talk about it because in cold cases like this, or an ongoing investigation, so to speak, police officers and the people who are involved do not talk about the case because it is illegal to talk about the case now. If you talk about the case, you basically just blow your chances of ever finding out who did it. But if it's a missing persons, for an example, if it's a missing person and you put in the flyer, have you seen this, such and such, but you can't really go into details as to who you think the suspect is and what the evidence is and so on like that. And that's what they can't talk about. And that's the frustrating part about the whole thing that John has a problem with, that any parent would have a problem with, honestly. But the whole case was just really strange, and in my opinion, I'm not ruling out both of the parents. I'm not ruling out that they didn't know that the person who did it and just didn't know that that person was actually responsible for it. They may have known the killer and just didn't know it, or the brother knows who did it because he may have saw something and just didn't say anything. Somebody or someone knows who did it and they're just not saying anything, and it's really strange to me. And I also think that there's so many holes in Patricia Ramsey's statement and the way that the interview was done that just makes this whole thing strange than what it is. And it's sad that she's not here to really still pursue her daughter's case and everything. It's just really crazy. The whole case was crazy, and it was tragic, and it was horrible, and it's still talked about to this day. It still remains unsolved. So anyways, I hope you guys got a lot out of today's episode. I hope you guys got a lot of information and you learned something out of this one. And if you haven't already, hit that red subscribe button and that notification bell so you'll be notified as to when I upload videos in the future, and you don't miss out on anything interesting or fun or all of the above. Also, don't forget to check out the description box below this episode where I list all of my social medias. Go follow me there. I hope you guys have an awesome afternoon, morning, day, or night, wherever in the world you are watching this from or listening to this from. And I will catch you guys in my next episode. Later.